for once, I was scrolling the internet, and when I see Chip Kelly, again, I assume I'm going to disagree with whatever he has to say.
Amen.
But Chip Kelly, the UCLA coach, had a really, really awesome take when it comes to college football, conference realignment, expansion, and everything that really has to do with the state of college football. So I'm going to let you guys take a listen to it, and then we'll discuss a little bit about what Chip Kelly had to say. But in all honesty, I think it is one of the more unique and probably one of the better takes when it comes to conference realignment. This is what Chip Kelly had to say.
What is the biggest issue that you might have right now, whether it be realignment, NIL, transfer portal, and what would your plan maybe be to try to solve it?
I think they're all a problem, and I think we need to have a conference commissioner. I think football should be separate from the other sports. Just the fact that our school is leaving to go to the Big Ten in football, our softball team should be playing Arizona in softball. Our basketball team should be playing Arizona in basketball. But because football left, and they're saying, well, how do you do that? Well, Notre Dame's independent in football, and they're in a conference and everything else. I think we should all be independent in football. And you can have a 64-team conference that's in the Power Five, and you can have a 64-team conference in the Group of Five. And we separate it, and we play each other. You can have the West Coast teams, and then every year we play 7 games against the West Coast teams, and then we play the East. So we play Syracuse, Boston College, Pitt, West Virginia, Virginia. Then the next year you play against the South while you still play your 7 teams. You can play a 7-game schedule. You can play 4 against another conference, another division opponent, and you can always play against one Mountain West team every year so that we can still keep those rivalries going. Not that I've really thought about this. Not that I've a lot of spent of time on this. But I think if you went together collectively as a group and said there's 132 teams and we all share in the same we all share the same TV contract, so that the Mountain West doesn't have one and the Sun Belt doesn't have another and SEC has one and they have another, that we all go together, that's a lot of games, and there's a lot of people in the TV world that would go through it. You can sponsor each one. Instead of calling it Group of 5 and Power 5, you can call it Amazon, Nike, bid that out to things. You can do a lot of different things. But I think if we still do the same thing and take all that money, and I would do this, and I think this needs to be done, that money now needs to be shared with the student athletes, and there needs to be revenue sharing, and the players should get paid, and you can get rid of NLI, and the schools should be paying the players because the players are what the product is. And the fact that they don't get paid is really the biggest travesty.
For the first time in my life, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to say, Chip Kelly was spitting.
Yeah, he was on.
My God, he nailed it. He nailed it. Like, I think college football would be a better place if Chip Kelly wasn't a coach. It was actually like the
conference commissioner.
The conference commissioner. Like, I thought that was a great idea. I like how he highlighted the players are the ones who need to get paid because of the product. I think he's kind of understanding that while all this is shifting in college football, and maybe it works out, like there's a chance that this can really screw a lot of schools and a lot of programs.
It will. And the Pac-12 dying is not going to be the last conference that ends up dying. Over the next 10 years, you'll probably see another one, and it may be in less time than that, right? Specifically looking at the ACC, and you want to talk specifically about that conference, you look at what Florida State being the conference champion didn't mean anything.
Right.
In a conference where you win the Big Ten, you're in. You win the Big 12, you're in. You win the SEC, you're in.
Yeah.
Right? Now, to that whole conversation, I totally agree. I totally agree that when you're talking about college football, it's its own entity. It should not be in the same conversation as softball. It should not be in the conversation even really as basketball, because it is completely different in terms of revenue. Now, Chip says all this, yes, but you have to look at the position that Chip Kelly is in. Chip Kelly is the head coach of the UCLA Bruins, a team that is going to be on the outside looking in the Big Ten when it comes to competition. The reason this won't happen is because there is zero incentive for the SEC to do something like that. There is zero incentive for the Big Ten to do something like that, right? When you're talking about sharing these TV contracts, why would the SEC, who has the national champion over the last how many seasons, why would they opt to split money with the Big 12? Why would they opt to split money with the ACC when they know, regardless of the college football playoff expanding, they're always going to have more teams?
Right.
Same with the Big 10. There's zero incentive for the Big 10 to go out there and make a move like this because it hurts them. It would hurt their conference because they would be taking money out of their own pocket to go out there and support a dead Pac-12 or an ACC or a Big 12.
I think the part that could maybe meet in the middle, and instead of saying, okay, football goes completely conferenceless, maybe let the football teams move conferences, but don't change all like these other athletics to where it's like
I do agree
basketball.
with that part, yes.
Basketball now has to travel all the way across the country. Volleyball has to travel all the way across the country. Softball has to travel all the way across the country. Soccer has to it's
Stanford and Cal have to play each other in basketball next year.
Biggest thing that a lot of people were talking about when all this happened was like a lot of people aren't thinking of the student athletes. And with football, it's a little bit different because you're playing one game a week. You're playing one game a week.
Yeah,
it's very focused. You know exactly where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And you travel after being at home for a little bit. Look, man, like there are students. There are people who are in a sport where a major league is not the next step for them, or maybe it's not even a possibility to say that's going to be my career, like in softball. Like there's not this one league that's going to come in and make sure I'm supported for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Like it's important that you're able to secure yourself for the future. And while like going and playing your sport is important, to add almost doubling, if not sometimes tripling the travel time and expenses that it takes to go out and to do that is going to handcuff a lot of these student athletes and hurt their future beyond the sport.
Think about this. Stanford and Cal going to the ACC, right? And that's, again, regardless of it being by choice because of where everybody else went and you didn't want to stick around for a dying Pac-12, Stanford and Cal on the West Coast have to play conference basketball games next season against Syracuse and Florida State. Tell me why that makes any sort of sense. For any, not just Stanford and Cal, why does that make sense for Syracuse? Why does that make sense for Florida State? It's the only reason that's happening. Seriously, the only reason that Stanford and Cal have to go travel to those specific cities and play those teams. The only reason that Stanford and Cal softball have to go out there and play those games is because USC and UCLA wanted to play Big Ten football.
Yep.
What world does that make any sort of sense? So you're punishing these athletes. You're punishing these parents. You're punishing these recruits. You're punishing these assistant coaches because the LA schools want to finish 5th and 6th in the Big Ten? Seriously? That's what we're doing? And again, Chip Kelly, he brings up a great point. And I am so glad that it was a coach
somebody who's moving
from who really started this. Outside of Texas and Oklahoma, UCLA and USC are the reason that conference
they were the
realignment
domino.
is what it is.
Yeah, they're the domino that ended the Pac-12 forever.
Absolutely. And that's something that, again, he brings up such a valid argument. He brings up a great point. It's just there are so many moving pieces. There are so many teams. There are so many different organizations that have their hands in this pot that is college football and the NCAA that makes what he is proposing such a difficult thing to accomplish. There was a comment earlier, I'm trying to find it right now, that brings up a really, really solid point just about, there is ESPN really does have their hand. And not just ESPN, but a lot of these other, here we go, Will has it. He's pretty close to what needs to happen. The networks have garnered too much power over the schools and make decisions to alter the game for their monetary gain. Cough, cough, ESPN and college football. Cough. That's where it's at.
It's tough because a lot of the times there's not a ton in these schools' control. And then when they are presented with the opportunity, again, it's the same thing that ASU and U of A had to go through when the Pac-12 was crumbling in front of them. Yeah, maybe you do want to stay. Maybe you don't want to subject your student athletes to this, but then you're kind of given the choice. You either make this decision and you jump, or your entire athletic department basically collapses. And when you are given those two choices, you choose the first one every single time.
Right.
And it's tough because it's not the best choice.
No.
But to be honest, it's the only choice that is provided for them right now, because then you look at the route that a Washington State and Oregon State's taking. If Arizona State was in that boat as well, like you're not going to be set up for success in the next couple of years. Imagine if all of this was happening with Kenny, right? Like, oh, this football program, it's on like the precipice of something. They're starting to build. All that's great. We don't have any funding. Screw NIL. we don't have any funding because we are not in a major conference right now, and now our football program's suffering, which means we're not going to make as much money, which means every other program then suffers because of that funding.
It really does. It is all of what you're saying.
And it sucks. It sucks. It's like they have no choice. They have no choice but to go and to jump and to do that. And that's why there were a lot of reports that's like ASU was kind of dragging its feet a little bit to get in there, because they didn't want to subject all of their student athletes to that, and also go through a lot of people who are working for the Pac-12 who have jobs in media through the Pac-12 that were also working closely with ASU. That all has to shift. But at the end of the day, you have to make that choice. It's a hard choice, but you have to make it. I just don't think it's likely that we get to a place where somebody sits down and goes, what's best for everybody? Because everybody's
you're
right.
in a world where there's too much money for
Right.
everybody.
Why
think about everybody else when you can think about yourself?
ESPN, the top schools, the Georgias, like the Bamas of the world, like they're fine, and if anything, they're going to thrive in all of this. And as long as that happens, this change that Chip Kelly says, it's not going to happen.
No.
It's not.
And
that sucks.
The last point I'll make about this is he references Notre Dame. As somebody who, again, lived in South Bend and covered the Irish for a couple seasons, not every school can do that.
No.
They don't have the alumni base to support that. Notre Dame does. They don't have the history and tradition, not just in football, but in a wide variety of sports that Notre Dame does. They do not have the, specific TV deal that Notre Dame had with NBC, has with Peacock.
There's a mystique around Notre Dame that even teams like a Georgia and an Alabama or an Oregon and a Washington, they might be better football teams, but there's that certain, here's a word for you, je ne sais quoi, about Notre Dame that makes them draw eyes in.
Can you spell that word?
No chance.
Yeah, okay, I was just
No,
curious.
I'm a talker. I'm not a speller, baby. But you're right. Like not many people or not many schools and programs can say that.
And there are flaws
that
that come with it. There are consequences of Notre Dame being an independent. You look at specifically when the college football playoff is going to expand, and you're talking about teams that get buys. It's conference champions.
Yep.
Notre Dame is not in a conference, right? Like it is certainly something that at the end of the day impacts the Irish, and you fully expect more conference realignment to really take place over the next, again, 5, 7, 10 seasons. Things are going to change, whether that is the ACC, whether that is the Mountain West, some of these other schools and conferences poaching some of those universities like a San Diego State, like an Oregon State, like a Washington State. It really is going to be interesting to see where college football goes from here. But regardless, head to the comments. Let us know what you think of Chip Kelly's take on conference realignment. Hit that like button.